Welcome to the Imam and the Pastor, a presentation of topics important to both Islam and Christianity. Today's topic is personal autobiographies of the speakers. We now present Pastor Kent Philpott of Miller Avenue Church in Mill Valley, California.
Hello and welcome to our program, the first of the program called The Imam and the Pastor. I'm the pastor. My name is Kent Philpott, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am. And then later, second part of the program, you're going to hear from Imam Qadir, who will give you a bit of a autobiographical sketch. So I got to begin. I was born in 1942, 50 days after Pearl Harbor. My dad was working in the shipyards in Portland, Oregon. The farming, they were wheat farmers back in Shadner, Nebraska, the Sand Hills area of northwestern Nebraska, and the Dust Bowl kind of did them in, and they migrated west, settled up there in Portland, and that's where I was born. My dad ended up being a Fuller Brushman, by the way. He was the longest serving Fuller Brushman in their history, 50 years. He walked the streets with his case selling products, and a hard-working man. And so we moved to Los Angeles, primarily because of my mother's asthma, and we moved to the northernmost part of Los Angeles, up against the San Gabriel Mountains in a little town called Sunland, Tahunga, little twin towns. And there I went to high school at Verdugo Hills High School. I was an average student, thought I was a great baseball and basketball player, but later on I realized I wasn't so good after all. But I did play that, and it was a gang-related area, and we had to deal with that. It was one of the facts of life. I remember having to pick different ways to get to school and after school so that I didn't come across some of these guys and get beat up. But it was a regular occurrence, and this part of life in that part of Los Angeles. I was one of those guys that got married young. I was married at 19. I married the first girl who would go out with this homely boy. I always thought I was homely. I never went to a dance while I was in high school, not even the senior prom. And so the first girl who expressed interest in me, we got married a couple years later, and finding in those days that I couldn't make a living. I tried selling Fuller brushes, but I wasn't any good at it. And I joined the military. And I joined the Air Force. I had a little difficulty because I had some problems left over from stupid things I did when I was a kid, but my recruiter was able to smooth that over, and I was able to get in the military. I ended up becoming a medic, and I spent 4 years in the Air Force doing that, 4 active and then 2 years inactive. I ended up with an outfit called 2nd Casualty Staging Flight that's still there in Fairfield, California, and we dealt with all the wounded from what was called the Pacific Theater who would come through us. And I remember finding out about the Vietnam War because started having wounded Green Berets and Rangers coming through, and sometimes I would sit up all night talking to these guys in the back office and learning about this and reading their medical files. So that's what I was doing. I was just your average guy. I wanted to be a school psychologist. I went to Napa Junior College to get an AA. I finally got a BA from Sacramento State, went on to an MA, left just before I completed that. What happened to me, I was going to school at University of California at Davis. I was taking 2 psychology courses, 2 philosophy courses, upper division kind of work, and I had a Professor Child, Dr. Child. It was called Philosophy of Religion, and we had to write about a religion. And I thought, oh, I'll write about Christianity. I know all about Christianity. Well, I knew about a paragraph's worth, and it wasn't enough to do it. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to have to go to a church. I got to find some people that know what this is. My parents went to church. My mother went to a Methodist church. My dad went to a Baptist church. They didn't see eye to eye on these things. But my dad didn't become an actual Christian until I was 15 years old. He was converted in a Billy Graham crusade evangelistic thing in Los Angeles. And my dad went there and he became a Christian. I remember the night because he came right in the middle of the night. He came into my bedroom, woke me up, and told me that he had become a Christian. They went to church. You know, he went to church. My mom didn't. But he went to church all the time, but he didn't become a Christian until I was 15 years old. I remember when I was getting on the train to go to Lackland Air Force Base, on the train to basic training. And my dad gave me a New Testament, a little black New Testament. And I remember getting on the train and putting it into a trash can. I didn't want anything to do with that New Testament. I didn't really know about Christianity. I had a friend who was a Roman Catholic who went to Holy Redeemer Church by Peninsula Park in northeast Portland. And I'd look at that church and it would scare me. The architecture, and it sort of scared me. I don't know why, but so I had to write this paper on Christianity. I went to a couple of different churches and trying to figure it out. The first one didn't work so good. Then I went to a church that my landlord recommended, because I talked to him about it, didn't know where churches were really. And I didn't like that too much. But then, because I worked at night from 5 o'clock in the evening to 8 in the morning, and we'd go to midnight chow. And I got to know two surgery techs, Vern Hogue and Don Etheridge. They invited me to go to the First Baptist Church of Fairfield, where the pastor Bob Lewis was. And so I started going there, a little bit at a time. I had to write the paper. I don't think I did so well on the paper, but my first real exposure to understanding, actually hearing what the message of Christianity was, what we call the gospel. So, to make a long story short, after 9 months, I finally became a Christian. I had previously prayed the sinner's prayer. You know, God, I'm a sinner, God forgive me, I believe in Jesus. You know the formula, many of you. But nothing happened, of course. And I was in a position where I was ambivalent. I didn't know exactly what to do. But I enjoyed my life. I had no crisis to look at that I was worried about. So I was just going along. But in a way that I cannot explain by myself, all of a sudden, bam, I was converted. I became a Christian, what we call being born again. And I ended up deciding I'm going to go to seminary and be a preacher. So I applied to Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary in Mill Valley, California, was accepted, moved there, and spent 3 years doing a 4-year program because I didn't have any money, had to do the GI Bill. And so I graduated in 1968 with a Master of Divinity and was involved in the Jesus People movement in 1967. February of 67, I worked as selling shoes at JCPenney in Corte Madera, Marin County. And I'm listening to the song by Scott McKenzie, "When you come to San Francisco, wear a flower in your hair." Well, it's like I heard God say to me, go to the hippies in San Francisco. The very next day, Thursday, it was a Thursday night, I went. After I got off work, got there about 10 o'clock at night, ended up being introduced to a man named David Hoyt, who was one of the 4 main leaders of what's called the Summer of Love. He and Bob Sutherland, a Buddhist priest, and 2 other people. I started a Bible study in the basement of the Hare Krishna Temple on Frederick, right by Kezar Stadium where the 49ers played. David became a Christian, and it was really an incredible thing that began, and I was a part of the Jesus People movement for several years. I preached in the Haight-Ashbury, preached on Hippie Hill, passed out literature. We started Christian houses all over the place, and eventually developed a church that I pastored for 10 years in San Rafael. Later on, I went back to seminary, to San Francisco Theological Seminary, for a doctorate called a D.Min, not an academic degree, what's called a practical degree for pastors and ministers in local churches. At one point, I went through a divorce. Looked like that was the end of my ministry career. The denomination I was with didn't want anything to do with a divorced pastor. So I went to San Francisco Law School, and I ended up got a partner. We had a business and enjoyed that for many years, but then returned to full-time ministry in 1984 as pastor of the Miller Avenue Baptist Church in Mill Valley, where I've been ever since September of 1984. So here I was, living in the parsonage, building a second family, and enjoying the work that I was doing. When 9/11 came along, I began an interest in Islam and started writing essays. I'm mainly an essayist. I like to write. During the 1970s, I was writing a number of books, published by 3 different publishers, but then stopped. I kind of got frustrated with the Christian publishing world. But then, through my essays, started writing again, and I had a keen interest in Islam. And it continued over the years, and began writing again a number of books, and starting a publishing house we call Earthen Vessel Publishing. My wife Katie and I, a work we love, and we publish 1 or 2 books of mine a year. We publish other people. And we just enjoy 2 things. I call myself an old-time gospel preacher, and that consists of 2 things. Teaching the Bible to those people who want to be serious disciples, and secondly, preaching the message of Jesus to people who aren't believers. Those are the 2 things I do, and I love doing them. As you can tell, I've been born in 1942. I'm 75 years old. I just stopped my last baseball. I've been coaching baseball, high school baseball, and at San Quentin Prison baseball. Was doing that for 17 years, and I've so enjoyed the man you're going to meet in just a minute, Imam Qadir Al-Amin, and we've become friends, and we joined together in doing this program. We're going to turn the program over in just the next clip you're going to see to Imam Qadir. Thank you.
We now present Imam Abu Qadir Al-Amin of the San Francisco Muslim Community Center.
Good evening. My name is Abu Qadir Al-Amin. I'm the Imam of the San Francisco Muslim Community Center, located at 4760 Mission Street in the Excelsior District of San Francisco. I'm very honored to be here with you this evening to join in sharing information on the program called The Imam and the Pastor. And I'll be sharing some brief information about myself personally. I'll give you a thumbnail sketch into something of my life. I was born in 1950, March the 12th, 1950, in a small town called Danville, Illinois. My parents were also raised in that area, though they were born in, my mother was born in a different city. She was born in Paris, Tennessee, and then moved to Danville, Illinois. My father was born in Danville, Illinois. So I spent the first 9 years of my life growing up in Danville, Illinois. So I had a very good experience growing up there. I had a lot of fun sledding and ice skating and fraternizing with my classmates and things like that. I have a very fond memories of my days and times in Danville, Illinois. My father was stationed in the Air Force. He was in the Air Force. We didn't travel with him, so he would be on leave. And when he was on leave, he would be there for maybe a month or 2 months, and then I'd have a brother or sister on the way. So that was part of my experience. And then in 1959, my older brother, who had some heart conditions and health problems, the cold climate wasn't too good for his development, so it was suggested that we relocate to California. My father was stationed at Travis Air Force Base, and so we moved to Vallejo, California in 1959. Our understanding when we were moving here, we thought we were moving to Valley Joe, California. Because we didn't understand the pronunciation of Vallejo at that particular time. So moving here in 1959, there was only my older brother, myself, a brother under me, and I had one sister at that time. Later, my mother birthed 9, raised 8 children, 5 boys and 3 girls. So I came up in a very wholesome household, not particularly religious. I don't have experience of growing up in a church community or anything like that, though my mother was a very devout Christian woman, and my father was opposed to the idea of any organized religion. However, the household I grew up in instilled within me and my brothers and sisters values and ethics that were universally accepted, like honesty, hard work, decency, cleanliness, respect for your elders, respect for women. So I grew up in what I consider to be a pretty good family environment. I was playing in the yard and some little boys, neighborhood boys, kind of backed me up on the porch. And I was content to stay and play on the porch because they said if I came back in the yard, they were going to beat me up. And my mother heard this conversation. She was in the living room and the window was open. So she said, "Son, come here, I want you to go to the store." And I was a little nervous. I said, "Oh, Mother, go to the store?" She said, "Yeah, and you better not lose none of my change." So I had to get off the porch and confront the challenge in the environment. And me and one of the kids who tried to bully me, we're still friends to this day. He lives in Little Rock, Arkansas. Whenever he comes here, we get together and spend some good time together. At a young age, I recall my older brother, this is still in Illinois, my older brother and my uncle who was living with us, who was 7 years older than me. We were told that we were going to be getting baptized one Saturday. So a bus came through the neighborhood and picked up all of the neighborhood children, and they took us out to a pond, something like a pond, to be baptized. And I observed it, I looked at what was going on, and I made my way back to the bus. And I sat on the bus and I watched and I didn't participate. And when I got home, my mother questioned me about it. She didn't punish me or anything like that. I told her I didn't believe that it was something that I wanted to do, so that's why I didn't do it. And for years, though, I thought I was a Baptist because my mother was a Baptist, but I didn't belong to a church community, wasn't raised in a church community. My knowledge of the Bible was very limited. And then fast forwarding to my youth as 12 years old, I remember going to a church in Vallejo, California, and it was a Saturday evening and they were showing a documentary about Egypt and the pyramids, and some of the information that was shared that evening got my interest, and it made me feel good about myself in some ways that I hadn't felt good like that before. So it kind of sparked an interest in me. And then later on, as I continued to go to junior high school and live in Vallejo, California, my older brother began to be influenced by a very popular movement that had attracted the likes of Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. And he began to bring home literature. He began to bring home books and newspapers and things of that nature. So that was my first introduction to a variation of Islam. It wasn't Islam in its purest form, but it had elements of Islamic beliefs, values, language, words, terminology, and that got my attention. And I began to read and think, and I remember once as a teenager I had taken some pills, some Secanols, very popular in certain neighborhoods back then, people getting high, experimenting with marijuana and alcohol and pills. And I had taken some Secanols, Red Devils as they called, or stumblers. And I actually thought I was gonna die. So at 14 years old, the first time I called on Allah, I said, "Oh Allah, if you just let me come down off of this, I won't do it again." And so that was my appeal to God when I had put myself in trouble. And I believed that he responded to me, and I didn't do that again, at least not to that degree. I'm not painting a false picture of who I am, but as a teenager, I was experimenting with those things. Then at about 17 years old, I began to claim the religion of Islam, though I didn't fully embody the teachings and the practices. But if you ask me a question as to what my religion was, I considered myself a Muslim because I believed in Islam, though my belief was not fully informed, nor was I fully practicing Islam. And that led me to later on in life being faced with a very critical situation in my life. I was sentenced to die in the gas chamber, May the 4th, 1970. And while undergoing that experience, I did some personal introspection and began to contemplate why I was in that dire circumstance and what behaviors of mine had led me to be in that situation. And I made up my mind that I didn't want to leave this world in the same mental and spiritual state that I was in that had led me to be sentenced to die in the gas chamber. So I made up my mind that wherever I would go after being sentenced, that I would become a Muslim and I would be a good Muslim. And in pursuing that, I began to learn my prayers. I began to study the Holy Quran. I began to share my newfound faith with other people around me, with my family members, my mother, my father, my brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles. And I thought it was something that I just should do. It was natural for me to share that. It's like having a good meal at a restaurant and telling somebody about it and wanting them to come and enjoy what you've enjoyed. So it was in that spirit that I began to share my newfound faith. And I remember having a conversation with my father. And at that time, I was in an organization called the Nation of Islam, the one that produced Malcolm X, that Malcolm X later differed with, and that Muhammad Ali also was a part of. And my father, being an older person, a wiser person, I think I was 20 years old at that time, he told me I would be better off if I pursued the Islam that Malcolm talked about after he left the Nation of Islam. And in my youthful enthusiasm, I told him Malcolm X was political. I need the prayers, I need the discipline, and that was being offered in the organization that I was a part of. And later I came to understand that my father had much more wisdom than me in terms of looking at life and the world. And later I adopted those same views that he encouraged me to pursue. I became Imam in San Francisco in 1984. I received my first appointment as Imam in 1980 by Imam W.D. Muhammad, a esteemed Muslim leader who transformed what was the Nation of Islam and brought Muslims in America into the universal teachings of Islam as we find in the Holy Quran and in the life example of our Prophet Muhammad, God's peace be upon him. He appointed me as Imam in Oakland in 1980 over a substantially large organization, and it had a full-time school. It was a very enriching experience for me. And then later, he also came and removed me from that position, and later the community in San Francisco asked me to come and serve in that capacity. I shared a good friendship with Imam W.D. Muhammad, an individual that I consider to be my most influential teacher. I studied with him for approximately 33 years. I've also been fortunate to study with some of the renowned Muslim thinkers that are here in the Bay Area, individuals whose names I won't mention at this particular time, but there's a great wealth and resource of scholarly individuals throughout California, especially Northern California. And I'm fortunate that I've been a beneficiary of sitting in circles and classrooms with individuals who have devoted themselves to acquiring knowledge and serving humanity. And that's what we try to do, develop our character so that we can serve our families and our communities and make efforts to make the world a little better than the condition that we found it in when we got here. About yourself, I'm married. I've been married since 1979. I've been blessed with 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. I have 8 grandchildren. So this program, I believe, is going to help us get to know one another better, and in getting to know one another better, we will have a greater value for peoples whose experiences may not be just like ours, but are rich, that are powerful, that are valuable. And once we know the value of the human life, I think we'll appreciate each other more and develop more love and understanding.
We now present Imam Abu Qadir Al-Amin and Pastor Kent Philpott discussing today's topic.
Welcome to the second part of our program, the Imam and the Pastor. I'm Kent Philpott. I'm the pastor.
I'm Abu Qadir Al-Amin. I'm the Imam.
Now, we talked about how is it we address each other. And
yes, you can address me as Imam Qadir.
so I address this gentleman as Imam Qadir.
And how should I address you?
Pastor Kent is fine.
Pastor Kent.
Now,
Thank you.
let's talk a little bit about what Imam means. What's the origin of that word, and what's the Arabic word?
Yes, the word Imam is a word that's used in the Holy Quran. It's used to describe the person who leads the daily prayers. It means leader. It means one who goes out front and serves as a leader. It comes from an Arabic word that also the word mother comes from. Is mother. Imam is mother twice.
Okay.
And it also is a word that describes what we call the community, which is called Ummah. So you have Imam, and Ummah. And there's a connection in that the Imam has to be as sensitive to serving the needs of the community as a mother is in serving the needs of her family. So it's a very spiritual term. Also, the prophet Abraham, he prayed that God would make imams from his descendants, And God answered his prayer, and we believe that Muhammad, the prophet, peace be upon him, was an answer to Abraham's prayer that he would make imams from among his descendants. And God answered that prayer and said, but my promise is not within the reach of those who practice oppression.
Pastor is a term that you will find that essentially means a feeder. A feeder. It's an agricultural term, essentially.
Yes.
The feeder would feed the animals.
Yes, yes.
Provide the food. And in Ephesians chapter 4, Paul talked about the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors and teachers. And the word pastor and teacher are linked together with an and. They're essentially the same thing.
Yes.
So the pastor is a feeder. Teacher, primarily,
Yes.
is what a pastor does. Teaches the scripture, and but somewhere along the line, after a few hundred years, the term pastor switched in meaning.
Okay.
It means the one who takes care of.
Yes.
And
Pastoral care. Yes.
But essentially, the idea is a teacher and a preacher.
Yes. In Islam, there's a similar concept in that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said all of the prophets were shepherds. And the term that's translated shepherd, some translations would translate that into pastor. And it also, it comes from a word, ra'in, which means to look out for.
We understand the world in which we live, the conflicts that go on that have succeeded in incredible ways of dividing people, making people feel uncomfortable with each other,
Yes.
building up anger, misunderstandings, even vengeance, and fearful kind of things. I remember that I was fearful. So I think there's value in what we're doing, Imam Qadir,
Yes.
and that you and I can sit down and talk together.
Sure.
And we've enjoyed it. We've been getting together for some time now and
Yes.
working out the details of this program, and
Yes.
it's been a good experience.
Yeah,
I really look
our
forward to
friendship is developing, and
it. It is.
we see different parallels and intersections where our lives cross, and there's a great benefit, I think, in getting to know people. One of the places in our scripture it says God created you male and female, nations and tribes, not that you would have ill feelings toward one another, but that you would get to know one another.
That's right.
So,
We're neither one of us, and I think we could talk about this for a while.
Yeah.
Neither one of us we're not trying to evangelize each other.
No.
This isn't an evangelism program.
That's right.
We're not trying to persuade people to our point of view.
Right.
And we're going to disagree on a lot of stuff.
Certainly.
Because, the way we got this formatted, we're going to have different themes. Who's God? You're going to talk about yours, I'm going to talk about mine separately, and then together we're going to discuss.
Yes.
And that could be interesting.
Yes. Very interesting.
And we'll find areas, I think a lot of areas, probably on just about every single subject, where we view things differently. But we also view very many things the same.
Sure. Yes, I think the differences, some of them are natural, and then there are some differences that I think we acquire from our environments. I grew up in a certain way, and I saw things according to the environment I was in. Then when I got in a different environment, my horizons expanded. So I think, travel and, going to different places and getting to know different cultures and people, it just helps us develop our sensitivities toward accepting differences. Mm-hmm. I don't have to agree with the way a person chooses to dress or talk, that's that person's choice. And, you know, having some acceptance about those kind of things, it makes for a more peaceful person. You know, I think we have less stress in our life when we can do that.
And without, we can hold our own personal beliefs and not feel as though we have to be chameleons.
Right.
We don't, you're
That's
not
right.
going to change your belief
Right.
when talking to me.
No.
And I'm not going to change my belief when talking to you.
Right.
But I want to understand Islam.
Yes.
I've been studying it for a number of years now, about 15, 16 years. And the more I study it, the more I appreciate and understand Muslim people.
Right.
And I know that you have felt the same way with Christians, or you never would have wanted to be a part of this.
Right. Yeah, I have a lot of family members that are Christians. As I said, I grew up in a Christian belief system with my mother, raising me to believe in the Christianity. So it's comfortable for me to understand that. I understand it. I'm not upset by it. I'm not threatened by it. You know, I don't feel necessary to be antagonistic. You know, it's just not part of my makeup. By the same token, the word Islam, just to try to help people understand, Islam is an Arabic word, and it means submitting one's will to doing God's will. And from that word, we get the word Muslim, which means one who's a recipient of peace as a result of doing God's will. Peace comes to us when we respect what God tells us to do as far as how we live and stuff like that. And then our greeting is God's peace. It's translated as a greeting, but it's really a statement telling us what our obligation is.
Now, what is that word? What is that?
That term is Assalamu alaikum.
Okay.
And
I used to try this when I go to the mosque, the Mill
Right.
Valley Islamic Center, and a couple of the guys there would try to teach me
you
to
to
say
say it,
this.
right.
I have a
Assalam.
very difficult time.
Assalam
As-salam
alaikum.
alaikum. That's right.
That's
As-salam.
very good.
I actually have it written down.
And it actually means that we are all responsible to maintain the peaceful order of society.
There you go. Okay.
That's what it means.
Yeah.
It's not like a password.
You know, I imagine that there's going to be people who watch this program who are not going to like it, and they're going to hit that remote button real quick.
Yeah, well, you know, there are so many things that people can look at. And then there are those who are seekers. There are people who want to understand. There are people who are, and we're not trying to hold anyone hostage. If somebody doesn't want to watch it, they have the freedom to change the channel, and those who like it, hopefully they'll learn something, and hopefully we'll make some good impressions.
I hope
We're
so.
not trying to discourage people from listening either,
No.
or watching.
The planet is rather small.
Yes.
Its resources are limited,
Yes.
and as things change around us for the better, for the worse, and in many people's minds for the worse, all the more important for the people of the world to be able to live together.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a one world religion here.
No.
Everybody be like me.
Never that.
But I proclaim the message of Jesus,
Yes.
invite people to believe in Jesus. You do the same with Islam.
Right. I believe in Islam, and it didn't originate with me. It resonated with me. So when I heard it, it spoke to something in my core, and it reached my heart, and then eventually it reached my mind and my behavior. But initially it reached my heart, and it began to work on me to where I began this internal struggle with myself and trying to make myself conform with these higher values. But that's very personal. That's individual experience, and individuals experience reality different. Some people love the fog. Some people can't stand it. You know, so.
I remember when I was early on a Christian, became a Christian when I was 21. And after about 6 months, I became very evangelistic.
Yeah.
I was sort of like really zealous.
Yes.
And I would encounter people that believed other things than I did, which was a lot of people.
Yes.
And I would feel threatened by it.
Right.
And then and defensive. I would get defensive, and then I would become offensive. Both. They kind of went together.
Right.
But as I grew up, as I matured as a person and as a Christian, began to be able to listen to what other people had to say, though it differed
Yes.
radically.
Yeah.
Radically.
Yes. A little over the top in my youthful zealousness and enthusiasm. I won't say zealousness. I think my youthful enthusiasm.
Okay, maybe that's a better word.
I might have been a little pushy in
I was
trying to
pushy.
share something that I thought was beneficial to me, as though other people had the same needs that I have. People have different tastes, different interests, different needs. And as I got older, I began to value that more than when I had this kind of let's save the world approach. Though the world is still in need of salvation, I don't think those methodology was the best ways to get that done. Yeah.
So it's an unusual event, I think, that you and I can have the kind of fellowship and relationship that we have.
Yes.
Thoroughly convinced of our faith belief.
Yes.
And able to discuss these. And I think we want to model this. And I think part of the program is, the reason for it is that this gives us an opportunity to show that people of differing views,
Yes.
making no attempt
Right.
to accommodate and become rather disingenuous about our belief system,
Right.
that we can maintain our positions and model that. Model that, because this is the world we live in, and it's a small place,
Right.
and we have to live with each other.
Yeah, you know, coming from San Francisco, there's a group of very enlightened religious leaders that belong to an organization called the San Francisco Interfaith Council. And one of the principles that's expressed there is you can express your religious faith without thinking that it's going to offend anyone or be unaccepted or be rejected. That we're not trying to melt everyone into this one system of belief. The differences are real, and we should respect them and be open-minded enough to hear the other person's point of view and try to get some understanding, you know.
When I began talking about this program, and I think it's been about 6 months now, we've been working on it, and I've had a little pushback from some of my Christian friends who have said, well, Philpott, what you're doing is you're giving a platform for Muslims.
Yes.
And and I said, good, of course.
Yeah.
The more you understand, the less fearful you become.
Right.
If you understand where a person's coming from and you have an opportunity to know that person, hey, this is just another person on the planet here, flesh and blood, God's creation.
Yes.
And we have to respect that and learn to value and appreciate. And so I've finally been able to have a good comeback.
Yeah.
When people accuse me, what are you doing here, Philpott?
Right, right.
With this program, so.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people, even in the Islamic faith, everyone doesn't value interfaith activity or that kind of interaction and getting to know other people. And that may be their own insecurities in some cases.
I think so.
And sometimes what comes out as a result of it doesn't change anyone. It just helps us have a healthier appreciation.
Well, I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yes, I do too.
I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing this.
Yes.
When we talk about the different, we're going to look at some real stuff.
Yeah, let's look at.
We're not fooling around out on the margins out here.
Right. Honestly.
We're going to look at the real issues.
Yes.
Tawhid is one of our first.
Tawhid.
I think it's our first program.
Tawhid.
Next time, Tawhid. Tawhid, the oneness of God.
Tawhid.
Yeah. I appreciate. Anytime you want to correct me,
right.
Imam Qadir, please do.
Yeah.
Say it again. Tawhid.
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 Right.
Okay, I had it almost right. That's going to be one of the interesting ones.
Right.
But they're all interesting.
Yes.
And we got a long list of them, and we're gonna go at it.
Yeah, and the Quran it's a book that's it's clear, it's straight to the point. It has some of the shortest chapters that have the broadest impact, and on some issues it's discomforting sometimes.
Sure.
You know, truth can hurt. And sometimes the Quran will hit you. You know, I'm talking about my own personal experience.
Sure.
With the scripture and say, oh, wow, I got to measure up. I got to be better. I got to correct this defect that I have. I'm looking at this incorrectly. You know, so, you know, it's a book that helps you to grow. Sure. I won't say force, I say help. It helps you to grow. Yeah.
Yeah, the scripture that I believe, Genesis to Revelation. Yes. We consider it the inspired Word of God. Yes. I've lived with it since 1963, and been teaching it rather diligently. Yes. Over the course of time, and I can say the same thing for the biblical material. And I would like to say too, and I would like to hear your response to this also. What I'm going to be attempting to present is mainstream historic biblical Christianity. Yeah. Now, I find myself as a Baptist, but I was a charismatic Pentecostal for about 10, 12 years myself. And I graduated from a Baptist school and then a Presbyterian school. Yes. And I consider myself in a Reformed / Calvinistic theology. Yes. And although I'm not a fundamentalist, I'm no liberal. Yes. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool evangelical Christian. Yes. You know, and I'll be coming from that position, but trying to be as broad mainstream Christian as I can. Right. And
the sources that I draw upon and will be drawn upon for our discussion. I'm not an academic, though I am educated. I've gone to school. I haven't gone to Islamic institutions, but the traditional method by which knowledge of Islam has been transmitted is older, wiser, studious people share it with younger people, and the traditions are passed on. The Quran is taught like that. The history of the Prophet, his hadith and his sayings, all of those things are passed on. So those are the things that I'll be using, the source material. I won't be quoting as much the scholars and the thinkers, because when you look at the history of Islam, it was about 1,500 years of history, and people have been making commentaries on this book for 1,500 years. It's an exhaustive body of information. And I'm not that fluent in Arabic to say that I have all that source material that I can refer to. But I do have what we call the foundational knowledge upon which the academics and everybody have to depend upon, which is the Quran and the life of the Prophet. So I'll be drawing mainly from those and from some methodologies that my teachers have given me to help share our beliefs in a system that didn't have the privilege of those things.
So now, the format we're doing, I want to restate it for
Yeah.
those people who are watching this first program. There are really two programs, two roughly half-hour programs.
Yes.
The first one where we explain our position on whatever the topic is. And that's the first half hour. You'll have about 15, I'll have about 15. We'll
Yes.
do our presentation.
Then we'll.
And then the second program will be very similar to this format here, where we're going to
Have
sit
a
here
discussion.
at this table
Yes.
at the CMCM, the Community Media Center of Marin in San Rafael, California. And we'll sit here and we'll discuss the topic for really 29 minutes.
Yes.
And that's going to be the interesting part.
Yes.
To be doing this, because we're going to be doing it for pretty close to 2 years.
That's good.
And who knows, we might find some new things to talk about as we go.
Right.
So I have to remember that we're both senior citizens. Now, you're younger than me.
Yes. I'm very privileged to be a senior citizen. I'm
Me too.
Grateful. I consider myself a junior senior citizen, but a senior citizen nevertheless.
And I am a senior citizen.
Yes.
And I think we're both glad to be able to be alive and well on the planet and have something worthwhile to do.
That's right.
It's a great thing, and so we have in our remaining years some opportunities.
Yes.
That we get a chance to do this. So we have the shared goals, developing tolerance for others, those people who differ with us, even finding ways of cooperating together.
Sure.
And I think that as we go along, we might find that there are ways of doing that. I can't think of one right now.
Well, we share the world together. When we leave here, it'll probably be dark outside.
That's true.
And no matter what the other person believes in the car on the road with you, you want him to have some light so he can get to his destination without running into you. So I think the more enlightenment we have in the world, the better we can see where we're trying to go. Your destination may not be the same destination as mine, but we share a road that we have to be on together. Whether it's light or it's dark, we're in this shared environment together. So, sharing this knowledge and this information, I think, is going to help people see a little better. And it may not change the course of where they want to go and what they're going to do and what their activities are, but if you see me and I see you, there's less likelihood of us having a collision on the road.
This is true. One of the things I forgot to say a little bit earlier, to those people who are watching, let's say that are in the Christian community or not,
yes,
that that essentially, I realize I'm not going to be able to speak for all Christians.
Right, right.
I don't know if I'll be able to speak for Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, all Protestants. I don't know.
Right.
There's such a wide variation in Christianity, and there is in Islam.
Certainly there is.
Wide variations.
The variations in Islam are not only the ones we know about, Sunni, Shia, things like that. There are variations based on people who are college graduates and people who are not, people who have wealth, people who don't, people who grew up in this cultural environment versus this cultural environment. There are so many differences. But one of the things that we kind of think is that the difference are part of the mercy of God, that He allows these differences to exist, and we have to develop this interdependence. We don't know it all. We don't speak for everybody. Sometimes I may say something, my wife might not agree with it. but we still are in a relationship together. We love one another, and we accept correction from one another. And then I still have a right to express myself. One of the beautiful things about America is one of the freedoms that we cherish is the freedom of speech.
Exactly right.
And we don't want to see our speech restricted to only a certain class of people speak for all people. No, all people have a God-given voice that they should be allowed to express.
Exactly right. I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that guide us. Now, we've been trying to come up with how we're going to end this program, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now we got this little thing now, just in case.
Okay.
So I'm going to hold this up so that we can both see this.
Yes.
So we can say it together.
Yes.
Okay. And we went over this, and it's
Yes.
acceptable
Yes.
to Christians
And
to accept
Muslims.
them to Muslims. So we're going to do it together. Here we go.
May the peace of God be with you.
So long.
All right.
That concludes today's episode of The Imam and the Pastor. We hope you have enjoyed our presentation. There is more to come.